The impression I got was that the British forces were unwilling to take casualties. I don't believe that the British forces are terrible fighters. I just believe they were under terrible commanders at the time, which left them in a precarious position. My cousin used to fly missions into Basra, and he had much to say on the British forces there. Many of them were holed up in their compounds, while in the American sectors no such thing existed. Sometimes a heavy-handed approach is the only way. You mentioned that the US forces approach is overwhelming force, only slightly true. The US forces are larger for one reason. The US must be able to wage a conventional war on two fronts. This is the reason for the size, but even this is misleading. The size of the 1.7 million is mostly support personnel. The saying goes, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. The US military is the best logistics in the world. These were lessons learned hard in World War II in the European theatre, and more so in the Pacific theatre, where the US was basically fighting alone for much of the war. The few Australians that were alongside the US were so few in number that they were eventually absorbed into American command and performed brilliantly. The Falklands War was almost lost because of the logistics. Other things were different between us. American forces don't mince words. We say kill the enemy, while British forces will likely say neutralise the opposition. This may shed more light into the ethos of the two forces. Some contrasts have been made with US forces, but not all US forces operating in those areas are regular forces. Many of them are National Guard and reservists akin to your territorial army, so some of the comparison are really unwarranted. National Guard, reservists, territorial army forces are not up to regular standards, so to make comparisons between them and regular troops shouldn't really be done. You mentioned the Royal Marines. Yes, the Royal Marines is almost Special Forces level, while the US Marines are a conventional force. US Marine Corps are combat troops and are designed for amphibious operations, but also to prosecute wars inland. The RM, the Royal Marines, is a raiding force and can do limited incursions inland. The two might be a marine force, but they can't really be compared. In the US Marines, there are special forces that can be compared to the Royal Marines, but in general the two are very different animals. Another thing about our two countries is our societies are very different. Our form of government is different. We are a republic while you are a democracy. Our process is democratic, but we are a republic to be sure. You mentioned the Brits like to fight. We Americans do the same, but we don't fight at sporting events. To us, we view that as barbaric and shows a lack of civility. We do fight in bars and clubs where alcohol is involved, but I think that it's more common in our country. In every high school we have Greco-Roman wrestling, and it's common to have wrestling matches. I have a female cousin that won several awards in regional matches in Texas. Gotta love a beautiful girl that can handle herself, lol. She said she owns a gun, and just like many of us do, we also love our boxing and mixed martial arts. We live in Washington, where there are several martial arts schools in close proximity. They are very common here. I myself have taken 3 different martial arts styles as well as boxing, and have competed in many tournaments. Going back to the military, other things are divergent between our two forces. British forces tend to do 6-month tours, but our forces do longer tours. The problem with doing 6-month tours is that while the men enjoy it, the overall strategy suffers. In 6 months, one is only beginning to understand the enemy. When one is rotated out and replaced by new soldiers, which now has to learn his enemy. This was criticised by US commanders. There are other things that were criticised initially, and in time, and the British forces have changed. The British troop in Helmand today are not the same troops that were in there initially. Their performance is much better, and I believe that there is much to do with the self-examination from much of the criticism they received from the US. I remember watching something where a British general was answering a question about what was wrong with British performance, and the question was asked as if it was the case of a student now becoming a teacher. He commented about how the British forces had viewed Iraq and Afghanistan as another Bosnia operation. This is much like saying the Americans are at war while we are on peacekeeping operations, as one Brit had mentioned. As you mentioned, a Marine was saying that he had got his run time down to 19-minute miles. That's unheard of. He would be out of the Marine Corps. The standards are much higher than that. I was running 6-minute miles in the Army, and the standard for 18 to 21-year-olds in the Army is 2 miles that must be done in the maximum allotted time of 16 minutes. To score on the maximum points that in that event, the 2-mile run must be done in 11:54 minutes. The Marine Corps does 3-mile runs in their PT tests. It may have been that he meant 19 minutes on his 3-mile run. An average of 8-minute mile is considered slow and a 7-minute mile is considered average. For PT, we normally run 3 to 6 miles depending on how much time we have for PT. We put equal emphasis in all areas, not just cardio. Another thing that is in mind is that applying a blanket to overall forces on performance of a few individuals is not the way to go, and about comparisons as many like to do. In the US Army there are many different divisions that have different capabilities. The 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii are a light infantry division. As such, they adapt to jungle and tropical type operations. Very hardy troops that ruck up and down in hills as many Brits are not possibly used to. The 10th Mountain is exactly what the name denotes, a mountain division specialising in mountain warfare. The 24th Mechanised Division is a mechanised infantry division, and as such cannot be compared to the 10th Mountain Division or the 25th Infantry Light Division. If you have any questions or comments or be interested in hearing them, I hope what I said sheds more light on the subject. And that was from Chaldean442. I'm going to split this into 2 videos, so look at the second video, and I will also be doing the third and fourth video on his reply to the first letter. Thank you.